Hello everyone. Hello everyone. This is our last discussion for this semester. Our last topic is feminism and key to gender sensitive society. Okay, we have to engage in theories to understand how the world actually promotes gender sensitivity. Okay, feminism is a very good way to actually um, promote the reality and the status of all the previous topics that we have discussed, from violence to empowerment to equality to biases to those things, no? So literature and arts, specifically in feminism, has been a very strong key to gender sensitive society, and that's what we're looking for in the entirety of this lesson. Okay. um, in this module, we examine the process of theorizing and learn to appreciate the dynamic and flexible nature of this process. Okay, much of our understanding of the world, our societies, ourselves today, rest on theories and knowledge generated historically and predominantly by, unfortunately, men. Well, why is that? From the word itself, history, his story, that means it pertains to a more male-dominated, um, i- male-dominated time. When I say the history or the things that happened in the world solely circulates within the male gender. However, the use of feminism or the rise of the feminism contradicts and equalizes this concept of history. Okay, so before anything else, okay, let me present to you our objective. So medyo marami siya, pero it's specific. Don't worry, it's specific. That's why it's plenty. Um, Introduce the concept of theory. Understand that theorizing is one way in which people use their assumptions to achieve, interpret, or impose meaning. Understand how feminist theorizing has challenged mainstream theorizing. Understand how diverse assumptions about the sample phenomenon result in diverse explanations, theories, and power positions. Understand how theory and knowledge are interrelated and how feminist theorizing and knowledge have influenced research, policy, and action. Understand the different feminist approach towards research, legislation, and policymaking. Identify relationship of feminism to equality. Identify the different approaches to feminism theory. Identify the impact of feminist literature in the concept of gendered society. So all throughout all throughout your module, you'll notice that I have inserted certain works, certain talks, and by the speakers and people who are promoting feminism as a way for us to learn. Okay, a way for us to somehow get an insight on what feminism is, because to tell you honestly, we need experts to talk about this. I am no expert regarding the feminism. I only know what feminism is, what's the concept of it, the nature of it. But to somehow live a life of a feminist, we need people who are actually more experienced to this, more engrossed in this, and much more rooted to the ideals of feminism. So I have a few people, a few articles and cases wherein I took it from works of feminists. Okay, so before anything else, let's start with theory. So let's start with the basic muna. Balikan natin yung pakaintindi natin ng theory. So what is theory? You may recall your lesson facilitating learning, Natsai, and other subjects which use theory. So, di ba? We have Pythagorean theorem, we have theories in the professional education, we have theories in science. Okay, so these things are more of the principle, not necessarily the principle, but the guiding model of what we are doing. Okay, what life is, how things work. So that's the guide, the theory. Okay, so although we have no precise universally accepted definition of theory, certain recurring elements appear in the literature, so which allows us to roughly draw the boundaries of concept. So I will not give a specific definition of theory, as the definition of theory varies from how you want to define it regarding its use. Okay? So, depende sa gamit po. So, let's recall our our idea of theory. Okay? Although we have no precise universally accepted definition of theory, okay, we have the framework of how it is done. Paano ba siya kinikreate, okay? Sir, parang may kulang or sobra or marami or iba. Pero still, I'm telling you, the process of theorizing or creating theory still rotates around these basic steps, okay? We have the first step, which is the existing knowledge, okay? We set assumptions from our existing knowledge. We create assumptions. We state a hypothesis, then we test our hypothesis, and then once the results are created, we create a general principle. And then after creating a general principle, we look at the boundaries or scopes and the limitations of it. Then we create a revision of the theory. We modified our first assumption, okay? Babaguhin na natin kasi syempre hindi mo naman ganun kakatalino, no? Naisip mo lang, diretso theory agad. So we have to modify it for some minor errors or major errors to create new knowledge. Okay? So kung titingnan natin, di ba ganito yung thesis ninyo? No? Ganyan di ba yung thesis? Okay? So it rotates around this. Okay? It keeps on rotating. Bakit rotating? Because your new knowledge will become your current existing knowledge or your schema. Then you'll try to improve that again and then again and then again and again and again. Okay. Um, so what's the nature of theorizing? The traditional mainstream of process of theorizing rests on the scientific method. So this is the scientific method. Okay. However, look at this. Okay. I want you to take a good picture of this in your head and hold it there for a while because there are problems within this process. What's the problem? Unrecognized and value-laden assumptions based on the male researchers' biases. May biases ba? Yes, there is. So later, I'll show you where. Okay? Overemphasis on empirical and quantitative data and the denial of the validity of the qualitative data. Lack of involvement of the researcher with the subject of the research. Impersonal and detached nature of the process and supposed objectivity of the researcher and knowledge. Okay, what are the biases? So here, when the researchers use this traditional approach to theorizing, however, their biases can affect the process at every stage. So, in the identification of the problem, in the formulation, I want you to look at this identification of the problem, hypothesis, calculated guess, design and thesis hypothesis, collection and interpretation of data. Okay? All of this relies on the researcher. So if the researcher is male, subconsciously it's one-sided, it's male-oriented. Okay? You look at the world in a male perspective. Okay? That's why if you notice, we have a lot of male proponents of theories and less from females. 'Di ba? So, konti lang yung theory from females. Why is that? Because the theories are created by males solely because they assume with they have this bias, no, may bias siya. So nagkaroon ng male domination noon panahon. That's why most of the theories are created by male people. Now, since that is the case, this identification of the problem, this hypothesis, this design, this interpretation of data is not absolutely objective. It's impossible to be absolutely objective. There will always be a human factor influencing using your subjectivity to somehow influence the interpretation, the hypothesis, the identification of the problem. 'Di ba? If you are a male person and look at the world, you look at the world as a male. No? You see problems in the eyes of a male person. However, you you have no direct focus on the entirety of the world because the world is not only for male gender. Okay? So doon nagkakaroon ng problema sa theory natin. So bakit sir ganon? Why do we start with the concept of the problem and theory? On the, I'm sure after looking at this, oo no talaga, ganun talaga. Na pwede talagang subjective. Hindi pwedeng hindi, no? When you do your thesis, you simply look for a problem that is directly affecting you. So in that case, it's somehow it starts subjective. Yung problemang nakikita mo or naapektaran ka. So that's why from the very start, from the identification of the problem, it becomes subjective already. And you cannot create something objective and absolute equal if you started out subjective. Hindi ka pwedeng gumawa ng objective na ang data mo for ang start ng process mo ay subjectivity. Okay? So we cannot say that there is an absolute justice in research. Okay? Hindi natin pwede sabihin absolute justice 'yon. Even pero may data naman, may number. How can that lie? Still, if there are empirical datas, we have the interpretation of the data and it's still subjective. Okay po? And the hypothesis created is still from the person. The set of assumptions, when we look at the step two, let's go back to step two, set of assumption, we assume in the eyes of a male researcher. Okay? So yun yung mga problema. Okay? An investigation of women's work conducted by research with a feminist perspective would in all likelihood rely on a variety of assumption. So pag ang gumawa naman ng research ay feminist, iba naman ang kakalabasan ng result, di ba? So even in when we look at national surveys, specifically sa COMELEC, di ba? May mga remember why Marcos was confident enough that he would win because the poll or the survey says he would win by a big mile. However, there's a concept behind the silent voters. What are silent voters? Silent voters are the wife, the OFW, the people who the the people who are somehow invisible. That's why we call them silent. No, they cannot be heard. Mga kasambahay, mga labor, mga hindi na i-interview or nasa-survey ng COMELEC. These are called silent voters. Ang na-interview yung husband, yung lalaki, yung worker, yung labor sa construction, yung manager, yung, 'di ba? Kasi yung nasa labas, yun yung nakaprontera sa public, no? And wives, usually from our previous discussion, mostly they stay at home dahil nandun pa yung gender stereotyping, no? That's why these polls and surveys during the COMELEC, during the votation, nagkaroon ng surprising Marcos. Nanalo si Lenny. Why is that? It's because of the silent voters, which I believe was not taken into consideration in getting the results. Kaya nabigla talaga siya noon. Okay? So, yun yung, yun yung biases ng theory. See, even the testing and collecting of data is already biased. No? Okay? So, let's proceed. So, these are the biases. So, let's proceed. Before we do the approaches, let us talk about feminism. Nagkaroon ng bias ang theory. No? The perception of the world is rotated about on male dominance. Okay? Thus came in feminism. 1940s, lumabas and lumaki yung feminism. So feminism is a movement to actually promote um, women, to not promote women, but to give awareness on women. Okay? So this the main goal of feminism is to create a gender equal society or gender friendly society. So I'm going to be presenting with you two Example approaches. Not, I'm not saying these are all the approaches. We have a lot of it, but I'm just going to be showing you two. Because what we need is feminism. I just want to show you a sample of an approach so that you'll be able to see how it works. Okay? So liberal feminism. Okay, liberal feminism is easily distinguished. I'll just give an example so that you'll get the idea of it. We'll have a lot to discuss if I'm going to discuss the whole concept of this. So liberal feminism is often considered assimilationist. So balikan natin yung sa inyong senior high, assimilation, meaning that women and not society or culture are required to change in order for women to succeed. What do I mean by that? When we say assimilation, um, let's say the society is not gender friendly. Liberal feminist wants women to empower themselves. Okay? Ako mag-a-adjust para i-accept ninyo ako. Ganon siya. Okay? Hindi kayo mag-a-adjust, ako mag-a-adjust. I will show the world that what I can do. Okay? So we call them liberal feminist. Okay? These are civil rights. Women, yung mga usually nasa rally, they promote women's rights. These are liberal feminists. I don't call them aggressive, assertive. Call them, I'd like to call them brave. Brave enough to show the world what they are and what they are and what they can do. Okay, I call them brave. I call them warriors, fighters. Okay, they want to break the system by standing out. Okay, so hindi niya nila binabago ang iba. Not like in Facebook, no? You try to convince people na ganito, ganito, ganito ang babae. No, liberal feminists would actually do something to uplift her status. Okay, so ganon. Next is the difference feminism. Difference feminism represents a broad spectrum of feminism that emphasizes differences between women and men. This approach identifies bias in science and technology by seeing what has been left out from feminine perspective, sometimes expressed as women's way of knowing. Different feminists have been criticized as being essentialist. So, what do you mean by essentialist? Um, it gives values to give it gives essence to yourself, no? Not only you but men and women. Ang gusto niyang palabasin nitong difference feminism, men have their roles, female have their roles. They're giving value and essence to it. Okay? That men could not survive without women and women could not survive without men. So ang gagawin niya, babaguhin niya yung buong community on how they approach gender. Yung isa, ako lang. Itong isa, tayong lahat. Okay? The two approaches demonstrates two variables. So, anong two variables in feminism? Both essentialism and assimilation construct a theme by which to attain genderless society. So, regardless of which approach you look into, it still points on the same thing. It still points on genderless society. When I say genderless society, we don't judge people by means of their gender. Okay? Essentialism conveys acceptance of the difference on both masculine and feminine, and the later, assimilation is focused on strengthening femininity. Okay? Yung isa, accept natin na ganito ang sitwasyon. And let's live together happily. Yung isa naman, I will strengthen myself para makasabay sa society. So dalawa yan. Dalawang approach ang pinakita ko sa inyo. So that's how feminist works, no? Feminism works. That's how it pushes. It fixes the problem of male-dominated society. Okay? So you have an activity for this. So kindly choose which one do you prefer the most. So write your answer on the module. Okay, you have a case study following these approaches. Okay. Now let's talk about feminist literature on gender equality. Okay, talaga. Literature, kailangan ba talagang pumasok sa literature? I think yes. Why is that? Literature or any form of art greatly reflects of the status quo. It reflects what is happening. Okay? So ano man sir kung it reflects what is happening? It's like a camera which takes a picture of a specific event. So when we look back on the past literature or what we call it classical literature, makikita natin yung history. Not like the history books that we see with dates and data and specificity. Instead, we can see the story from the eyes of the writer. How Shakespeare is in love, how he sees the person he's in love with, eh, how Leonardo sees the world, how Leonardo sees things, how Leonardo sees God, the Last Supper, diba? So these things represents the current time. So it takes a picture and it reflects what is happening. Why is that? Why is that important here? Um, because these literary pieces can change the perspective, behavior, point of view by empathizing. That's the sole purpose of art. Huh? That's the sole purpose of everything that we do creatively is to empathize. Um, Kumbaga to transfer to live the life of others, to see things to see things that you haven't seen before. Diba? That's why we take pictures because that's why we post pictures on Facebook because you want others to see where you are, how beautiful the mountain is, how beautiful the beach is. That's the same concept as literature. Okay? So, feminist literature on gender equality. The growth of the literary feminism has opened new doors. To quote Charlton, feminism is made to make humanity evolve. Okay? Not female, but humanity. So, through time, literature has been and will always be one of the best form of art expressing life. So, talaga ba? Um, Feminist literature, is it is it strong enough to penetrate the male dominated theories in literature? Is it strong enough? So let's see. Okay, let's look at some popular ones like the Marxism. Marxism has believed that art has a responsibility of changing political, ideological, and behavior of the reader, and the poetic principle of actually ang ginawa mong literary piece has a responsibility to change something. May purpose, may something mababago ka. However, meron naman isang principle na art for art's sake, um, that it's a poem because it is a poem. It's an art. Yun na yun. It it needs to be an art. But although they are contrasting, yung isa may responsibility, yung isa walang responsibility yung literary piece, still, both of them on needing to be heard na kailangan makita ng tao. That's where feminist literature comes in. This is where literature plays an important role, showing the concept of life in the writer's eyes. However, on the history of the literature, the ratio of female and male writers are at a big gap at about 20 male is to one female writer. Okay, this is counting on the statistics of the popular writers. Okay, this imbalance in the literary world has created a male-dominated perspective in the view of art. Okay, feminist literature then appeared in the late 40s, uplifting the women's gender. Okay? So lumabas to 1940s. It I think it's about time to make it not necessarily lumabas, but the peak is 1940s. The growth of literary feminism has opened new doors. Um, Feminism in literature focused on gender equality, gender biases, rejecting women as a form of an object, objectifying. We call that objectifying. Ano ba example nito? Ang pagbigay ng rosas or singsing sa babae para pakasalan. 'di ba? Kailangan maganda ang singsing kasi sinusuklian mo yung pagmamahal. So you try to materialize your love into the value of the ring. Ganun po, ganun siya. Women's rights, okay, etc. Everything about that. Objectifying women, the body, and things like that, no? So, um, my love. From the term my love pa lang, it's objectifying. You make the property mo, yung, you call the person love, di ba? So love or my baby. So, you're objectifying that. You are showing possession of other person, di ba? So, you don't have the right to claim possession of that person. So that's a violation of feminist literature. Ganun po ka-sensitive. So sino sa inyo mga friend niyo may mga may bebe, di ba? May baby na. Kumain ka na, ganun. So those are example of very stereotype in time objectifying. You call it objectifying. So pansinin nga natin kung gaano ka balance, no? So we have Martin Luther King, binago niyang racism. We have Abraham Lincoln, who wrote novels that changed and united the nation. Even Jesus Christ used parables in teaching people. So it's then proven and tested that literature has been a very influential factor in teaching and changing behavior, perspective, and attitude of the society and community. That is also the reason why we focus on feminist. That's why this is the key to gender equality. Okay, so the more we promote this, the more gender equal our society will become. Okay, so in your module, I attached a narrative from Ma'am Aileen L. Nidea, Parasulat Bicol nun. She is a member of Parasulat Bicol nun and Teatro Ragayano. Okay, so her her talk is on about feminism in Bicol writings, power of women in Bicol literature. Okay, it's in your module. I attach it. So, yung buong talk niya nandun naka-attach. Okay, this was done in Pili, CBSUA Pili. Last February 27, 2016. Okay? So, naka-attach po doon. After reading all of it, feel free to actually look for the sources she made. I want you to write a reflection of it. Ano bang reflection dito? You are to answer two questions. I post a question, two questions in your module. So please answer that. Okay. Eileen L. Nedea is a very influential writer in Bicol, very renowned writer in Bicol. Specifically, she's one of the few writers who deviates more towards feminism. Okay, so I can think of other people who are more focused on feminism. Maybe that's also the reason why she is the speaker. No? So you'll see different. Um, she shared different insights on different Bicol literatures that she used to help um, promote women, no? Promote women or promote feminism. So we have there Santos, we have Ma'am Dudes, we have Bobbies, we have Christine Belen, Redburn, we have Ma'am Ermina Torres, Ma'am Edna Campana from Calabanga, um, Carlos Ariola, even Sir Jerome Hipolito. So, yan siya naman. I think ang ginamit sa iya si Pagsaod kan katabang, Anhilaw na maluto. And An Paratukdo. It's all from Oda sa Tadik. So if you have copies of that, you can use that. Also, Estelito Jacobs, no? Yung pinag-rock niyang sinulat, Bagyo sa Oktubre, Ragang. So there are so many. I think she mentioned 17 examples of it. Okay, even Vic Nyarba, Sayaw sa Butal. Okay, so I want you to read all of it and then answer my question. Okay, now lastly, before we end, okay, I want you to choose one feminist literature. So bawal yung mga na-mention na, bawal rin gamitin yung una kong pinakita sa inyo sa first module. I want you to choose a literary piece which you think creates a big impact on the reader. Okay? Explain why is it effective and to be passed on. It should be one page, no? Double spaced, Arial 12, just the title and author of the literary piece is needed. Forward it to my Facebook VLP or email. So that ends our semester. Please wait for announcement regarding your examinations. Thank you.